Came from Jacksonville. Good evening. I'd like to bring the meeting order of the Wilmington City Council. I'd like to welcome all those who are with us here this evening and all those who are watching us at home on TV. Thank you for taking an interest in your government. This time I'd like to call on Reverend Jermaine Armour, pastor of St. Luke AME Zion Church, to give our invocation. Everyone will stand and remain standing afterwards for invocation.
Let us pray. Lord, before we ask you for anything, we thank you for everything. Because around our world, we're not lacking citizenship, but we are lacking leadership. Therefore, we thank you for the great leadership of the Wilmington City Council. May you give our council members your wisdom. May our policies have equality, and may our citizens love their neighbors well. In the name of Christ, amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will note that the annual update for the Cape Fear Public Utility Authority will be rescheduled. The executive director is under the weather and is not feeling well, so we will see him at our next meeting. So our first presentation, and our only presentation this evening, is a proclamation honoring the New Hanover County or New Hanover High School boys soccer team for their outstanding win in the state championship. This is the second year in a row that this team went to the finals, and they brought the championship home to New Hanover County and to the city of Wilmington and to New Hanover High School, hanging another banner there at Brogdon Hall, and that storied place, and just adds to the tradition of New Hanover High School and the Wildcats. So I just want to say on behalf of the citizens of Wilmington, congratulations on a job well done, and we're going to come up to the front here and have a proclamation from the city. Okay? Come on, everybody. This is a big deal. Gracious. Just so you folks will know, these guys went 27-0, 27, didn't lose one game, tied one, and then came back and beat the same team y'all tied, right? And beat them good. People were coming up to me and say that these guys were going to beat you, and I said, there's no way. And one of their players here, who scored 54 goals? Peyton, come on over here, man. Come out here. I think he was the player of the year. 54 goals. And I was out there a couple of nights, and I saw you guys play, and y'all did an outstanding job. We're really proud of your outstanding achievement for this community and for your high school. And this is, I believe, the first championship for New Hanover High School in men's soccer. Is that correct? And I believe this is the first championship in soccer for the entire county, correct? For every public school in New Hanover County. That's outstanding. You know how many public high schools there are in the state of North Carolina, and you guys have won this championship, and you've gone there twice. Outstanding work, young man, and outstanding work, Coach. TJ, you want to come on over here and read this? This is their coach, TJ Rennie. Rennie, nice to meet you. Congratulations. Job well done. Proclamation honoring New Hanover High School boys soccer team, whereas New Hanover High School has a long history of success on the athletic courts and fields and has achieved numerous state championships, and whereas New Hanover High School is recognized for both its academic and athletic achievements, and whereas New Hanover High School Wildcats boys soccer team won the state 4A championship on November 20th, 2021, and whereas it is an honor and a privilege to recognize the achievements of these young men in representing the city of Wilmington. Now, therefore, I, Bill Saffold, and the entire City Council of Wilmington do hereby congratulate and recognize New Hanover High School boys soccer team in the city of Wilmington and urge all residents to proudly join me in saying, "Go Wildcats!"
I didn't prepare anything. I'm sorry. Our players enjoyed great support from the city of Wilmington and everybody at the other schools, and hopefully we represented the city of Wilmington on the state level the right way, and just want to say thank you for all the support.
We want to say thank you and job well done, and what do you think? Repeat? Coach, you get them ready to go. We want a repeat here. Way to go, guys. Congratulations. Way to go. Okay, our next item of business is a consent agenda, items 1 through 4. Are there any items that any council member would like to hear separately?
C4.
C4? Okay, anything else? Okay, do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda items 1 through 3, excluding C4? We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. At this time, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Kevin Spears. Spears?
And I just want to ask about the other projects that we have in the pipeline, specifically MLK gym expansion. Just an update on that.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. As we shared with you back in November, I believe, we came to you with an update. We're working with that third-party architect to complete their evaluation and a pricing exercise. We expect to come back to you probably about mid-February with an update on the completion of that evaluation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, all right. I make a motion to move C4.
Okay. So we have a motion made by Councilmember Spears to approve item C4. Is there a second to that one? We have a second to that by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next order of business, which is our public information. We have two speakers that are going to be that are here to speak this evening. Each speaker will be allocated 5 minutes. Our first speaker is Ms. Sonia Benetone Patrick, who will be speaking to us about housing in the Creekwood development. Is Ms. Patrick here? Okay, we'll go on to the next one. Next speaker is Marie Gordon, who will be speaking to us about dangerous traffic on Wrightsville Avenue. Is Marie here?
Come on down.
That's okay. Take your time. Up here? Mm-hmm.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Marie Gordon, and I am representing over 90 members of our Carolina Place and Ardmore neighborhood. We are bringing to you tonight a safety issue, specifically the one-way section of Wrightsville Avenue that transitions from the top of Dock Street and runs through Gibson Avenue, where the posted speed limit is 25 miles an hour. This is a 0.4-mile section of road, so less than half a mile is the distance that we're talking about. Our community has noticed that speeding easily at speeds above 40 miles an hour drunk driving and driving the wrong way has increased noticeably over the past 2 years. There was one accident on Wrightsville at Gibson in 2020, and many near collisions on Wrightsville at Metz. Blaring car horns and screeching tires can be heard fairly often in our neighborhood. We also have an ongoing issue of wrong-way drivers on Wrightsville, despite 2 do not enter signs on either side of the street at Gibson. Recently, there was a significant crash about half a block up from the do not enter signs, where a car left the road, came up on the sidewalk, and crashed into a large tree. The police were able to apprehend the driver who fled the scene. We've had similar crashes where cars were headed in the correct direction, but lost control of their vehicles and crashed into the parked vehicles and took out the front yard fences and bushes. These were reported to the police. A year ago, we began talking to city staff at the police department and a traffic engineering and street signage official about these problems. The police helped by sending a traffic officer in a patrol car a few times last spring, but no tickets were issued as far as we know. About 6 months ago, we began posting temporary handmade signs to remind people of the traffic speed limit of 25 miles an hour. This was at the suggestion of the street marking and signage staff. And a few months ago, we talked to Councilman Spears and learned we could come to a council meeting and present our safety concerns and hopefully get some action, attention, solution, and support. Our neighborhood is densely populated, with most houses within 6 to 12 feet between them. This section of Wrightsville Avenue is literally our main street, with constant high pedestrian, children, and biking traffic throughout the day. The street is narrow, with parked cars congesting and limiting visibility in many spots, and this increased speeding is becoming dangerous for all of us. It is our understanding that the simplest solution, speed bumps, is not an option, as EMS vehicles must have a clear path on this part of Wrightsville. And this stretch of road also poses challenges with cutout parking and irregularly angled intersections. What other alternatives can we pursue with your help? We are open to any and all options, including new crosswalk painting, maybe including reflectors, additional stop signs, or new types of intersection calming devices. More official speed limit signs indicating a maximum fine, and ideally, targeted police speed trap support, because we know when people have to pay, they tend to pay more attention. We want to work with you and the city staff to improve Wrightsville's current traffic calming measures, signage, and enforcement for the benefit of everyone. And we're here to find out from you, how can you help? How can we proceed? Thank you, and if you have any questions.
Tony, can we get our traffic engineer that looks at these issues to evaluate that section there?
Yes, sir. We'll be glad to do that.
Okay, let's do that.
Yes.
That's what we'll do.
Okay.
We'll get our city staff to do that. Thank you. Yeah. I have not seen Ms. Patrick, okay. So that brings us to our next item of business, which are public hearings. Item PH1 is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 1.01 acres of land located at 4706 Wilshire Boulevard from RBCD Regional Business Conditional District to CSCD Commercial Services Conditional District for a 4-story mini warehousing development. So at this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Jeff Walton, our associate planner, will overview this item for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. The applicant proposes to rezone from commercial services for a 4-story mini warehousing development. On April 22nd of 2008, City Council rezoned the subject site to regional business for an overflow parking area for an existing automobile dealership that has remained vacant since 2020. This is an overall site where it's located along...
Excuse me, Bear, for a second.
Sure.
Dylan, our monitors, me and Mayor Pro Tem's monitors, and Luke and are not operational at this moment. Give us a moment. We just got a little
No worries.
technical difficulties. Okay. We're going to just take a 5-minute recess. Just let 'em- Kevin. Okay, we're back in session. Bear, come on up.
Thank you. The bear is back.
The Bear's back.
Just to recap, this is the aerial of the site showing the old parking lot that was there for Stevenson. This is the zoning map showing the RBCD on site now. This is the vicinity map showing the location on South College at the corner of Wilshire, near the former Kmart, near Harris Teeter. These are photos of the existing site itself as a vacant parking lot. These are some of the adjacent photos. There's a car wash that's been recently built next door, and across the street is the redevelopment of the mixed use that's hopefully will be in permit soon. The proposal is for a 4-story mini warehousing development. The building contains approximately 77,500 square feet and would be 44 feet 4 inches in height. If approved, this project would be vested under the previous land development code, as the application was submitted prior to the adoption of the new code. On October 21st, 2021, the Board of Adjustment granted variances for the proposed front setback of the building. I don't know where my pointer is. On the front setback, the side yard residential setback, which is on the lower western corner of the building, as well as a reduction in street yard along Wilshire Boulevard, basically to allow them to push the building closer to the street. The subject site is identified as a suburban commercial retrofit area of opportunity and special character street. The plan supports the redevelopment of an existing utilized surface parking lot and supports quality building site designs and calls for appropriate transitions between more intense commercial areas and surrounding lower intensity residential areas. The proposed redevelopment includes removal of an existing parking lot and construction of a self-storage building. The proposal locates the building closer to Wilshire, and parking is provided within the building along the rear of the site. While staff has concerns about the potential impact the proposed building height may have on adjacent residential uses, the proposed use will complement the proposed mixed-use development located across Wilshire Boulevard to the north and serve as a low-density transition. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, and staff believes the request is reasonable and in the public interest and recommends conditional approval, subject to the conditions in the case summary. And I believe the applicant is also here for a presentation.
Okay, very good. Are there any questions of staff? Sir, Mr. Reitmeier.
The current LDC, how would that, this is just a curiosity question.
Sure.
How would that affect this under the current land development code? Would it be a sweeping difference?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think the current would allow for this type of unit, but it would be limited to building lot coverage. I don't think it would allow for as much lot coverage as what they're proposing.
Okay. Recently, we, I guess, approved is the correct word, the development on the vacant car lot.
Yes.
And that's very significant investment and very special. Did those folks have any comments to make about this use?
Those folks are the same applicant as this
Same
project.
applicant. I don't need to ask anything else. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
This time I'd like to recognize the applicant.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members. Faison Sutton, attorney with Murkison, Taylor, Gibson, in Wilmington, here on behalf of the applicant. Also a proud New Hanover High School alum, so I was happy to see that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. With me also tonight, I have members of the development team, Mariana Molina, who's a principal of the developer. Thank you. Tammy Spivey of SEPI Engineering, and Robert High of High Construction. And they're all here if you have, technical questions. I appreciate Jeff's good description of the project, and I think you all have in your packet a good summary. So I'll just briefly summarize our position. As Jeff mentioned, this property is currently vacant. It is subject to a regional business conditional zone now, which means that it can really only be used as an off-site parking lot for what used to be the Stevenson car dealership. That's important because, of course, the car dealership is no longer there. So unless and until this site is rezoned tonight, it's really not worth much. It doesn't have a lot of use. Our request is for it to be able to be used for mini warehousing storage, which we think will be an appropriate, reasonable use for the surrounding area, and especially for this new, exciting mixed-use project that has been unanimously approved by City Council just a few months ago. On my PowerPoint, I have just one thing that you guys didn't have, which, there we go. This is just a map showing the aerial, which Jeff basically already showed. And then here is the architect's rendering of what we believe the building will ultimately look like. And then also the elevations, which I believe are already in your packets. So in addition to the approval of the mixed-use project across the street, we also applied for and received approval of those variances that Jeff mentioned. While they did allow us to move the building a little bit closer to Wilshire, the bigger point there is we were able to move the building further away from the residential neighborhood in the back, which I think will be helpful as far as any impact to the residential site. As far as I know, with all the public notices and the public hearing, we have not received any objections from the neighboring owners. So we believe that this project will be built well, aesthetically pleasing, will comply with the ordinance and help the city meet its goals under its code, and we request your approval.
Okay. Are there any questions of the applicant? Mr. Spears?
I do have a question. And it said mini warehousing, so I guess it didn't say storage facility. I guess that's a different terminology to kind of, it threw me off, I'll say. But any connection to the other development across the street, or just, I mean, because we all get the calls and emails about, do we not have enough storage places in our city? So
Right.
you're just trying to maximize your dollar, or what?
Yeah, I can give my thoughts, and yes, the developer would probably weigh in as well. But yes, the principles of the project, the new mixed-use project, are also the principles of this site. So certainly, the goal is to provide services for all those new residents as well as existing residents.
I mean, it looks good, but I mean, the storage facility is a storage facility is a storage facility.
We need them, and they make them, pretty nice these days. You want to speak? Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Mariana Molina. I'm here on behalf of Bella Vista Development Group, one of the co-developers of this project and the Paseo mixed-use project to be located directly across Wilshire. To your point about are these two projects tied together in any way? Technically, no. They're two entirely separate projects with different investors and different lenders, and I would assume, though, that the two will work nicely together and that we will have residents who live in Paseo utilize the storage facility, but there's certainly no official tie between the two. And as a part of our due diligence, we had a series of feasibility studies conducted to determine whether or not there was a need for any additional storage facilities in the area. And the necessity for that is because, quite frankly, if there's not, then presumably you wouldn't be able to rent the spaces, and then you wouldn't be able to pay a lender back. And so lenders would require that there in fact be a market for additional storage facilities. And all of our feasibility studies came back and said that there actually is quite a demand, particularly with the extensive growth that Wilmington is experiencing. So we feel good about it, and we think that it will be a nice addition to this particular area of the city.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Okey doke.
Appreciate it. If there are no other additional questions of the applicant, I'm going to open the public hearing and ask if anybody is in favor or in opposition to item PH1 to step forward. Seeing none, are there any comments that we have received, Madam Clerk, in your office? We have not received any comments to the clerk's office. Is there any other questions, comments from the council? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council, but I will also note that whoever makes the motion must read a consistency statement and reasonableness statement for the record. Are you making,
I made the motion.
Okay, we have a motion made by Councilmember Ravenmark, second by Councilmember Anderson. Mr. Ravenmark, will you please read the consistency statement?
Yes, sir. I move to approve the proposed amendment to rezone the property located at 4706 Wilshire Boulevard from RBCD Regional Business Conditional District to CSCD Commercial Services Conditional District for a 4-story mini warehousing development, and find it to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and to find approval of the rezoning request as reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed rezoning may complement the proposed mixed-use development located across Wilshire Boulevard to the north and will provide an appropriate transition between the commercial areas to the north and the existing single and multiple family uses to the south and east.
Okay. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. Brings us to our next item of business, which is item PH2, which is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 1.90 acres of land located at 3380 and 3400 Masonboro Loop Road from O&I 1 CD Office and Institutional Conditional District to MD 10 CD Medium Density Multi-Dwelling Residential Conditional District to allow for a 16-unit townhome development. At this time, I'd like to recognize City Manager Mr. Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Brard Chambers, our senior planner, will review this item for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. On October 5th, the council voted to remand this item back to Planning Commission because there have been several changes made to the site plan after the Planning Commission, and council wanted the Planning Commission to see those changes before it came back to you. I just want to remind everyone where this was. This site is located on the west side of Masonboro Loop Road, just south of Andrews Reach, across from the fire station number 15. It's approximately 1.9 acres in size, and it's currently vacant. This map shows the site in the context of the surrounding area. We have photos of Masonboro Loop Road and some adjacent properties. We have additional photos of the subject site and additional adjacent properties. In August of 18, council rezoned this property from R15 to Office and Institutional Conditional District for a CDMU project containing 2 office structures and 5 residential units. In September of 2020, council approved a modification to that district to amend the building elevations and to modify the condition prohibiting amplified music. This is the current site plan that council approved at that time. Each office building was approved for 2,400 square feet of non-residential on the ground floor and 2 residential units above, and a 5th residential unit was approved above the detached garage. The non-residential uses were limited to professional offices and personal services. This is the proposed site plan. The applicant is proposing to rezone the property from Illinois 1 CD to a multifamily low-density residential conditional district for a 16-unit townhome project. The applicant has submitted revised plans and elevations that include a reduced building height to 26 feet, enhanced buffer yard plantings along the northern and southern property lines, and they have modified designs for their stormwater management. The original proposal included an infiltration basin located in the rear of the site. If I get this, there was infiltration located back here, and that has been removed. On-site stormwater is now proposed to be managed via underground infiltration and pervious pavement. Any stormwater that exceeds the required volume control of these devices will be directed in a pipe drainage system towards the pipe drainage system in the Mesa Water Loop right away at the front of the site. So any water that's collected via the infiltration will be piped away from the rear of the site now. The site must meet standards for exceptional design based on the impervious coverage. The applicant has submitted a narrative that shows compliance with these standards, and that's included in attachment 8. The site would be accessed by a full access driveway on Mesa Loop Road. There would be an increase in traffic associated with the request, and the applicant has included options to mitigate that impact, and a summary of that is included in attachment 7. There is an approved trail project along Mesa Loop Road, which includes curb and gutter along the west side of Mesa Loop Road and extends a multi-use path from Andrews Reach to Navajo Trail. A minimum 20-foot vegetative buffer is required adjacent to single-family uses. As mentioned before, the applicant has proposed to install the enhanced buffer yard plantings, which include Leland cypress trees every 16 feet along the northern and southern property lines. There are existing 6 significant trees on site, two 38-inch oaks, a 32-inch pecan, a 48-inch pecan, and a 60-inch oak will all be preserved. And the slide you see on your screen is a comparison between the current CD and the proposed CD, showing building height, the units, commercial square footage, parking, and impervious. The revised elevations include a reduction in building height from 2.5 to 2 stories, and again, it'll be a maximum of 26 feet in height. The property is located across the street from an established neighborhood node. The comprehensive plan calls for development within existing neighborhoods to be consistent with design elements of nearby structures and enhance the overall character of the area. There are a number of non-residential uses, including a fire station and shopping center with restaurants, retail, and services located across the street. The proposed zoning may serve as a compatible transition between the established commercial area and the existing low-density residential areas around it. Staff does believe this proposal is generally consistent with our comprehensive plan. It believes the request is reasonable in the public interest and is recommending conditional approvals with the conditions included in the staff report. The Planning Commission voted 4-3 to recommend approval of this item. The last time it came before, they actually recommended denial 4-3, so we flipped the vote at Planning Commission based on the changes. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I believe the applicant is here to make a presentation as well.
Are there any questions? Mr. Burnett?
The changes, when it went back to the Planning Commission, did they vote again, or?
Yes.
Okay.
The first time they voted 4-3 to
4-3,
deny.
remember
This
that.
time they voted 4-3 in favor, based on the changes that were made by the applicant.
And those changes were the changes that the community was talking about, right, basically?
When we talked to the community, it was the impact of the structures, the height of the structures, and the privacy. So they reduced the building
Right.
height. They added additional plantings, and then there was also a stormwater concern. So they removed the basin in the back, which would generally, I can show you on
Yeah, I
the
saw
site
it,
plan.
they go to the front
So-
instead of the back.
Right, so if
Okay.
there was an infiltration in the back, generally you got a berm around that basin, and that would allow, or possibly allow, for additional ponding to occur between that berm and the properties to the north. That berm's no longer there, it can continue to do what it does today.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yep,
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
This time I'd like to recognize the applicant.
Thank you very much. My name's Cindy Wolf, and I've been working with everyone through this for, seems like quite a while now. But I believe we've come to a point where we have a good project. I think it's time to move it forward, hopefully. Just quickly, as Brian pointed out, just to recap a few things, we're at an intersection of Masonboro Loop Road that has services. It has everything that's perfect for what we believe a slightly greater density of housing development is logical for. We are technically downzoning from what's generally considered commercial and office and institutional zoning district to a multifamily low density. That low density can allow up to 10 units an acre. In this particular case, our 16 units translate into an 8.8 units per acre, so we're not maximizing the density. There were three main issues, as Brian pointed out. One was just the single family to attached housing, certainly the building height, and then stormwater. And I'd like to touch on each of those just a little bit. The plan we have now is no different than the plan that you've seen before, other than the fact that we have the enhanced buffers, the building height is lower than originally proposed, and all of the pavement surfaces, both the drive pads and the drive itself, are now pervious, porous pavement. So that makes a big impact on things. Although that chart that Brian showed surface coverage of slightly over 40%, with all of the pavement surfaces being porous, we now have an impervious surface coverage of only 22.3%. So it's sort of that we've fallen into the low impact design criteria that we would have needed to get credits regardless of having any credits at this point. So I think that's a big impact. One of the things that early on was an important part to the staff was that these units, rather than being oriented where you would generally bring a drive up the middle, which would have been at the jeopardy of the pecans, you would have flanked a drive on both sides, but that would have put the rears of units facing the rears of the residents. And so the side two is an important aspect of it. Preservation of all of the significant trees on site is an important aspect of our changes, and certainly the coverage. The building height, one of the conditions is that the building height is maximized at 26 feet. This is adjacent to an R15 district on all sides. The multifamily low allows higher heights with buildings, so the standard height or maximum height in those districts is 35 feet. Anyone building around us could build up to 35 feet. We're conditioning our maximum building height at 2 stories and at 26 feet. These are just pictures of the buildings adjacent to us, which are generally have second stories and have quite high roof peaks. The buffer yard was a big point of trying to have that separation between the single family and the attached housing. And I know Mr. Rivenbark in particular likes to see that it's a lot easier when you're talking about a buffer yard to see the perspective of what is actually happening. This is a cross-section taken between the closest house to our north and the closest building along the property line. There is a 20-foot buffer. The normal buffer yard along that 360-foot boundary would require 7 canopy trees, 11 understory trees, 90 shrubs. We're adding the leyland cypress to enhance the buffer even more. That's a fast-growing evergreen that often gets up into the 16, 20-foot height range, and we would have those every 16 feet, so that's an additional 23 trees. That same buffer is basically on both the north and south side, so not only, there, so it's duplicated. I didn't run a cross-section through that, but it's the same situation. The biggest conversation of our last meeting with you had to do with storm drainage, and we did a good bit of research after we got out of here. I've worked with the staff in the engineering department, and we uncovered a lot of interesting information. Any project that has drainage that goes off-site, the off-site requirement is to handle that drainage. Usually you don't want to treat it or anything, so you find a way to bypass it. In this particular case, our entire site does drain to the north towards Andrews Reach. That being said, when Andrews Reach was originally designed, they addressed it by putting what is colored in green, which is a swale, to not only take the drainage that was coming from Andrews Reach Drive and those lots flanking it, but our off-site to bypass and not affect the development that was going to go on there. So this is the approved drainage plan for the that Andrews Reach had prior to development. What happened was they didn't buy all the property they were going to buy, and so that caused some issues. Obviously, they couldn't put a swale over adjacent property. However, they did address it, the runoff that naturally comes from our site. Even though they didn't buy that site, they still, when they platted these lots, addressed it by providing a drainage easement. That would not only take our drainage, which was vacant pretty much at the time, off of their site, but also the drainage of Andrews Reach Loop and those lots along there. They continued to address it when they finally recorded Lot 32. So all along, I'm not denying that they may have some drainage issues in Andrews Reach, but they're not through the fault of any development that is on this side or would be to that point. Whether that swale and drainage or is acting is questionable, obviously. My guess is that as those houses were built, it basically got filled in. But that being said, we have a solution, and that's what we've worked with the staff on. And basically, our engineer, we have excellent soils as far as infiltration goes. That is why we proposed that 100% of the pavement surfaces will now be porous pavement. So we've got what's left is the rooftops and basically the curb and sidewalks. This is the preliminary stormwater management plan by the engineer, and we will still use low-impact design criteria, which will be infiltration basins. So the storm gutters from the rooftops will each be directed into infiltration basins spread around the site, not affecting the trees, and any overflow from them will then be directed out to the existing drop inlet and system that is already in Mason-Borough Loop Road. And as I said, this is after conversations with the engineer, the engineering department here at the city. So we believe not only have we addressed the issue, but it should actually be a benefit because now all of the drainage that's coming off the surfaces now that is going off into Andrews Reach is now going to be directed away. I just repeat that as far as urban infill with residences, we have the need for other housing in that price range. And with that, we appreciate the staff's recommendation. If you look at the staff summary, this is just about every box other than what was a mixed-use project is checked in that consistency statement. These changes were made, and the Planning Commission now recommends approval. We believe that the justification is there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions of the applicant? Yes, sir, Mr. Burnett.
Just clarity, and I think I understood it, that the swelling part, it's all of the water now is going to go away from the area that they thought they were having issues with.
Other than the natural areas to the back where we've eliminated the infiltration pond, we won't impact that at all. There won't be any land disturbance, and it won't be covered in any way.
Right. And that was one of the major issues that they had talked about the last time we met,
Absolutely.
along with the height,
These are two-story buildings
Right.
now. Originally, we had proposed three-story buildings.
Yes.
That was
Okay.
what the initial Planning Commission had voted on and didn't believe that was appropriate.
Okay, I like it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This time I would public hearing and ask if anybody wants to speak in favor or in opposition to item PH2.
Mayor Sappho, City Council. My name is Brad Pott. I live at 5700 Andrews Reach Loop, which is the northern border of the proposed property. Thank you for hearing our concerns. I know that there are a number of neighbors that have once again submitted our comments with regard to this proposal. We essentially like to break it down into a couple of issues. One is the precept that this is a transition zone between a commercial area. The planning office seems to think that this is the case. However, if you look at up and down Masonboro Loop, north to south, all of the commercial development is on essentially the east side of Masonboro Loop. This proposal is the only proposed multifamily in a long line of R15, as well as institutional with regard to the church and the school that's there. So it does stand out in some respects in that this really doesn't fit within the surrounding neighborhood and the character. The neighbors were actually in favor of Ms. Drury's previous proposal for an office and institutional mixed development use that would actually have far less impact on the surrounding neighborhoods, as well as to provide commercial services to the area. But that seems to be gone now. The other issues that we still see are in this proposal for drainage. We are still concerned about the viability of that tree. We actually had an arborist come in, and she actually provided you with a written record that was submitted into the public record today about what that tree is and what that tree means and how very fragile it is. It's somewhere between 200 and 500 years of age. It's probably about the same size as the Airlie tree that we all know and like. And it really is an important natural part of that in terms of drainage control in itself. So, beyond the initial, construction protection zone, I think that this really needs to be looked at with scrutiny in terms of what a proposed condominium complex would do to a 400-something-year-old tree. In addition, we're still concerned about the building height. The proposal brings the median roof line to 26 feet, but it still extends to about 30 feet, and we would ask that Mrs. Drury would consider making the peak elevation, not the median height, 26 feet. And then the last thing we like to bring to your attention is that this road is in terms of an infrastructure for the greater community, it really is failing. It has a level F in terms of its road rating as it stands now. There's this east and main development that's going to be happening about 900 feet to the south of the proposed development, which adds 178 units and probably some thousand or more car trips on this overstressed road per day. This is one more kind of addition to that in terms of increased density on this area, but it is important in terms of, being able to safely access the school and other areas around there. The traffic is becoming a major issue. So, we would propose as, neighbors, we would certainly prefer to see this as the original plan development and not as this higher density. But if it goes forward, we would still like to see, some iterations here in terms of the planning such that this is well thought out. Another issue is that there's a shared roof line. What happens in an HOA situation where that shared roof line for insurance purposes when the next hurricane runs through? There's a lot of kind of well thought out details of this plan that aren't quite there yet. And we would like to see those details well worked out before any increased density on that important plot of land go forward. So thank you for your time and appreciate any questions or comments.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Can I ask Cindy about the tree?
Yes, sir.
Are we losing that 400?
No, absolutely not. Preservation of the trees
Okay.
is a mandate that I assure you that TRC is very diligent of enforcing. It's a condition that Brian provided, and we've accepted the conditions that are proposed as part of the potential approval. And if we would intend to get an arborist also to make sure that that happens, because we won't get construction authorization if those trees are not preserved in the process.
Okay, and then the statement that he made about the medium height, that 26, and he says it's still 30.
That is correct. The building height in the city's code is measured to the mean of the highest roof pitch.
Right.
And to get 2 stories, I mean, this is a high quality of architecture, so you generally will have 10-foot ceilings, and to make 2 stories in there, that is certainly not unusual to have. As I showed you the pictures of the adjacent homes, all of those
Right.
homes probably have 10 to 12-foot ceiling heights. They're on 4 to 5-foot foundations, and they have extremely high-pitched roofs. So I don't believe that we are inconsistent with architecture or the building heights, and at the 2 stories, it was an impediment to the type of development my clients wanted, but we accept that it fits better into the character of their neighborhood to stay with the 2 stories. But we do believe the 26-foot is necessary as the building height is measured.
Okay, yeah. I actually was out there. I walked the area where you're planning to build.
Yes,
And the issue that they were showing me was the way that the land slants.
That's what I showed you.
Okay.
Yes, if you're standing in that piece of land,
Right.
there's a slope, and
Right.
we don't have a whole lot of slope around our entire county. But in fact, the difference between the pad of the highest on the preliminary stormwater and grading plan that the engineer prepared is basically 6 feet higher than the point of their
The
yards.
slope, right.
And that's the whole purpose of the buffer yards, the evergreen trees, the enhancement of the buffer, and all of the landscaping that's required for buffers to separate uses and visual impacts.
Okay, thank you.
And you said that there is a recorded, the last time we had this discussion was a huge discussion about drainage and flooding. And you found in the reports that there are drainage easements that are recorded on people's lots in the backyards.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct?
Yes, sir.
And the homeowners association has had an issue with that and is not aware of that?
I believe that the staff has made them aware of it. I certainly have.
Well, anybody that runs a homeowners association would know that those recorded easements are in place, or should have known that. So all that is draining toward the north, toward the south.
Both Andrews Reach, the road, and those lots, and then ours, drain basically towards the common boundary line. It appeared back when Andrews Reach was developed, it was slightly off the line. Now, whether a swale was built and when the builders came in and built those houses, they fixed up the backyards.
But it's a private they're private drainage easements, not public drainage.
That's correct.
Okay.
It
So
was
that means
for
it's
the purpose of that
It's a homeowners
development.
association issue if they have drainage issues on their lots.
Yes, they do.
Okay. That's all I want to know.
Ms.
Any other
Wolf,
questions?
you done? A question. So he brought up a valid point. I think everybody who lives in the city, even New Hanover County, knows that Masonboro Loop Road has a traffic problem. I'm reading here in the packet where it says the proposed rezoning would ensure a more efficient transportation system and improve access management relative to closing multiple existing curb cuts and incorporating a single driveway for multiple residences. How?
As you're certainly aware, traffic all over our city can be an issue. As far as service levels, it's a gray science. It depends on intersection activity. It certainly depends on volume and capacity. In the case of this new development down the road from here, yeah, it's a huge development. They're required to have a traffic impact analysis. And any time that a traffic impact analysis is prepared, they take into consideration projects that are on the board. They also take into consideration if nothing gets built, what every year in Wilmington an increase in residences makes a difference. So it is a science, it is an engineering effort. And there will be some improvements to the traffic circulation based upon that large development. It's probably based upon how many houses get there, to when they might have to do turn lanes or any other type of traffic situation. But again, the staff handles these types of things, and in the scheme of Mason-Borough Loop Road, the difference between the 2 offices, the 5 apartments, and these 16 units is minimal at best to the overall scope and volume of Mason-Borough Loop Road.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, have you received any comments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Late this afternoon, we received an email from Brad Pott, who spoke earlier, and I did forward that email to council. We also received an email late from Wanti Valiti, who is in opposition, and I did send you all that email just a few minutes ago as I just got it. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Are there any further questions from council? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council, and I will note that whoever makes the motion must read a consistent statement and a reasonableness statement for the record. We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Ravenbark, second by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes. Mr. Ravenbark, will you read a consistent statement for the record, please?
I move to approve the proposed amendment to rezone the property located at 3380 and 3400 Mason-Borough Loop Road from ONI 1 CD Office and Institutional 1 Conditional District to MFL CD Multifamily Low Density Residential Conditional District for a 16-unit residential townhome development and find it to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan. Based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and to find approval of the rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed rezoning provides additional housing options and serves as a suitable transition between an existing mixed-use node and the surrounding residential areas.
Okay. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes 6-1. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. Excuse me. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item PH3, which is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 0.22 of an acre of land located at 214 Market Street from HD Historic District to CBD, HDO, CD, Central Business District, Historic District, Overlay Conditional District to allow a restaurant use with outdoor seating and other limited uses. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Walton will overview this item as well.
Good evening. In April of 1970, the Historic District Commission approved construction of an office building in the contemporary colonial revival style. A rear addition was constructed in 1980. According to the Wilmington National Register of Historic Places, the building is non-contributing due to age. This is the general site where the property is located on Market Street in the 200 block. This is a picture of the building itself, as well as the rear parking lot under redevelopment. These are the properties adjacent to the site. The former Manor Theater, whatever we're calling it now, the alley in the back, as well as houses along Dock Street. The existing two-story office would remain, and a proposed two-story square foot building addition is proposed. The existing parking lot in the rear yard would be replaced with a 4,900 square foot partially covered outdoor seating area with an exposed terraced courtyard. Though the existing building is considered non-contributing due to the age, the applicant has included the Historic District overlay in this request. As a reminder, all alterations visible from the public right-of-way, excluding alleys, would be subject to the design review of the Wilmington Design Standards for Local Historic Districts and Landmarks. In the previous code, restaurant uses were not allowed in the HD, but in the newly adopted code, if the property is not rezoned, the use would be subject to size restrictions and prohibition of outdoor seating. This chart on the screen shows what would be limited in the present HD zoning and the proposed CBD zoning that would comply with the applicant's proposal. This is a map of the comprehensive plan. States that the city's historic resources and heritage should be recognized and promoted as an economic asset. As the city grows and redevelops, stewardship of neighborhoods, landmarks, historic districts, and landscapes should be fostered. Though the plan supports historic preservation, the plan also encourages preservation of the complete context, such as the historic streetscape of Market, as well as a transition from the subject site to the impacts on the Bergen Wright House that's adjacent next door. The proposed rezoning would not disrupt the historic streetscape and would facilitate the adaptive reuse of an existing building. Staff believes the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the Great Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, and we believe that it's reasonable and in the public interest, and recommend conditional approval subject to the conditions in the case summary. And I believe the applicant is also here as well.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, sir, Ms. Anderson.
There was some conversation evidently at some point about loading in the alley and not loading, because I noticed it was a condition, then it was struck. Could you kind of
Sure.
bring that to light for us?
Originally, we had a condition that basically stated that no commercial deliveries would be allowed in the alley, and that all deliveries would be by hand truck and loading occurring on Market Street. Staff was concerned about commercial trucks backing out into Market Street where the on-street pedestrian conflicts already exist. We also had concerns about trucks pulling straight through the property. And this is, the middle picture here shows the alley condition going from Market Street towards Dock Street. And then this is the alley in the lower corner as you come out onto Dock Street. And we were concerned about the impact of commercial vehicles coming through there. The condition was striked by the Planning Commission at their meeting because it is a public alley and can be used by anyone in the general public.
So in other words, if it's a public alley, we're going to be charged with keeping that clear and in good shape.
You know, I think it's more about the potential for commercial trucks backing out and affecting the pedestrians on Market Street, as well as the
No, I'm asking,
traffic.
it looks like to me the overgrowth is out into the, we're going to need, we do this with a lot of our alleys is what I'm getting at.
Sure.
And if we need to make it usable.
Sure. A lot of the vegetation that you see in that picture is part of their property, and a lot of that will be enhanced, and I'm sure they'll discuss that at the podium when they're up here. But I believe they're adding a retaining wall and additional vegetation in order to dress that side of the alley up.
so the concern from the city's perspective, was it trucks backing out in the market, like kind of accidents, and is that what you're more concerned about, or?
We were concerned in the upper right-hand corner is the alley going towards Market Street. And in this photo, you see existing parked cars plus the 2 lanes of traffic on Market. Staff was concerned about potential conflicts of commercial vehicles, beer trucks, whatnot, backing out into Market Street and not being able to pull through to Dock Street.
And they're going to explain to us how they worked that out, or?
The Planning Commission voted to strike that condition that we had placed, and so it's been removed as far as the ordinance for your consideration tonight.
Luke?
So if council wants to put insert that language back in,
I was just
that's
asking.
your discretion.
We got
Staff had a previous condition, and it was struck by planning board, right?
That's correct.
Councilman Rodmore?
Jeff, sometime in the last, I don't know, time flies, but sometime in the last 8 or 10 years when the old manor was a entertainment venue, the gentleman who had offices in this very building had some complaints, justified, about the entertainers coming and bringing their big trucks and stuff and offloading, and it was just kind of a mess. And we did something at that time, and I don't know if you would remember that or whatever, but we addressed that problem.
I remember the complaints, yes. I don't know how they addressed it. I think they limited parking to its time-restricted limit on Market Street. But that's just my impression from being a downtown resident. I don't know if that's the truth or not.
Well, I guess here's the thing. Restaurants and bars and that type of business in the CBD, I mean, if you get out into the hinterland, people's got parking lots, big trucks back up to it, they're off-road. That's not the case in the city. So, and I mean, Front Street, we have no parking zones that last a couple of 3 hours in the morning, so these beer trucks can get in and offload and get gone before the lunch rush starts. And I would think this would be no different. I mean, certainly, I don't know what the plan is for this eatery. If they're going to, I don't think there's a breakfast house. I think it's going to be more of a lunch, dinner type thing. So, I mean, working from a hand truck to whether it be food service coming in or beer or, any other service delivery. Isn't that your take on it?
That's my impression. The applicant has stated that they're looking to do a pizza place here with alcohol sales.
Mhm.
So you could expect to have past 11 o'clock sort of hours here. So deliveries probably would occur before the lunchtime crowd.
And those are things you work out with your vendors. I was in that business, and I didn't want a vendor coming to my back door at 1 o'clock delivering. I didn't have time for that. That's early morning or whatever. So, I know this is going to be nice. It's a nice location, but if they can't, if we have a problem with trucks backing out, then they're going to have to use that, that existing parking or those street front parking spaces in order to do it. And I know that on Front Street, we've designated certain areas for those service delivery vehicles. Perhaps that is something we could do here if it's not already done.
Certainly. So it's a great point that you're trying to make. And we do have commercial loading zones where the Wave Transit buses used to stack on 2nd Street on the northern side, which is still a good distance to carry a keg across the street. I've been speaking with Chance Dunbar with our parking management downtown about possibly looking into making some of these medians in the middle of Market Street as commercial loading zones as well. So I haven't really pursued it that far yet, but it's something we'll handle through the permit process to see if we can find some comparable loading zones for this business.
Well, if we're denying them the use of that alley, we certainly need to work with the applicant because you've got to get product in so you can sell it back out. So,
Sure,
thank you
absolutely.
very much.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
just as a point of clarification for council, this rezoning and the conditions on it apply to the property and hence the property owner. A public alley is beyond the scope of this rezoning. The city has control over that alley, and it's up to the city to restrict it appropriately. I would not recommend that any conditions related to the alley be placed on this particular property.
So what does that mean? I mean, on the one hand, we've been talking about not allowing trucks in so they can back out, and now you're saying that, is that something after the fact that we do?
Yes, sir, Councilmember Ivanbark. This rezoning affects the property and the private owner of it. As far as the alley goes, that is controlled by the city because it's public. The city, in fact, the city manager can put up whatever traffic control devices they deem appropriate to keep it safe out there, and that's something that I'm sure the city manager will look into as soon as council takes or does not take whatever action it chooses to on this.
How about this? How about if a truck, of course, when a truck approaches this location, they're going to be heading, what would that be, heading west away from the river. They pull up and back into the alley. That way, when they're coming out, they're seeing what's in front of them. They're not backing out of an alley. I understand why that wouldn't be safe, but if they're pulling out head first, that's a whole different ballgame.
Sure, it's the act of pulling, backing into a space from the road, but it sounds like from the attorney, this condition wouldn't even be something to consider.
Well, to clarify, as proposed right now, the alley's not, there's no restriction on the alley. It's just a public street, basically. I mean, an old-timey one, and that's the way it's proposed currently, right?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Well, let me ask this again. Is that a decision that we can make here tonight?
Council member, I would not recommend that this have any conditions related to the alley. That's something that if council wants to direct the manager to look at that alley and see what traffic control devices need to be erected, that's part of the city's power in controlling its streets. That's separate and apart from its land use power. I'd recommend that we not intermix them, and you just vote on this as it is tonight.
I understand that, and that's what we'll do. But at the same time, tonight, I will, hopefully, we can instruct Mr. Caudle to pursue that and not wait. I mean, these folks, I hope, are going to get what they came for, and that access is important to any business, and if it's there, I'd like to see them be able to use it.
Sure.
And if Mr. Caudle can figure out a way to do it in a safe fashion, I understand that. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Spears?
Initially, you said there was a restriction on the alley, and then the planning commission took the restriction off of the alley, right?
It was a staff condition we made when this was reviewed in the technical review. So there has never been any restriction on the alley. It was something that staff made a recommending condition on that the planning commission withdrew on their recommendation.
Okay, and I get what Charlie's saying, don't drive through the alley, back in the alley and come out, but the same presence of danger is still there, whether you're backing into, if people are on that sidewalk and you're backing into the alley and coming out, and plus on the other side of the alley, if we allow trucks to drive through for delivery, you got people, homes on the other side on Dock Street who are not accustomed to big delivery trucks coming down the alley now. So I think we have to take that into consideration.
Sure. Just to clarify, it sounds like Mr. Joy is saying that we can't consider that tonight. So what I can say is this is something that we'll flesh out during the technical review process because there are known pedestrian potential conflicts down there. And like I said, I'm trying to work on to find more commercial loading zones within the right-of-way itself to tackle these issues.
You through?
I'm done.
No, I mean, were you through?
Yeah, I said I'm done.
So I guess from what I'm hearing, it shouldn't even have been discussed at the planning commission level. Okay, I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Ms. Haynes?
Well, I think we get it. So it's going to just be a curiosity to hear from the applicant what their plan is, because I'm very familiar with that alley from Dock Street down to Market, and you would have a very difficult time getting a beer truck coming off a dock and heading down that alley. I'm not even sure it would be physically possible, because the De Rosette house and the other house to the east off of Dock Street have no setback. So they're right on the alley. So I'll just be curious to hear. I'm sure they have figured this out. And so I think I'll be interested in hearing what the applicant has to say.
Okay. Any other questions, staff? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We're going to hear from the applicant. Let's wipe this down for a second. Okay. Come forward.
Good evening. My name is Nick Johnson. I wanted to come and introduce myself. Amy Schaefer's here to talk about the more technical aspects of this. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the project itself. I'm from Durham. My wife and I own a small hospitality group, including Ponysaurus Brewing Company. We make our beer in Durham. And previous to the beginning of our work in the hospitality space, I'm a licensed general contractor in North Carolina, specializing in historic preservation and restoration. We've done several adaptive reuse projects in Durham, which we have won awards for Preservation Durham for, and we're very excited to be asking to become a part of your community as well with the incredible housing and building stock that you have here. It's an exciting place for me to come every time I'm here, and we're hopeful that we can create a wonderful third space here for people to come and eat, drink, enjoy themselves, you know, when we can all, again, get together and do that. So I'll turn this over to Amy for questions, but I'll remain up here if you have questions about specifically the operations and things that may be beyond the scope of what Amy knows. I'd be happy to tell you all about them.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. As Nick told you, he and his partners have extensive experience in not only the restaurant industry, but in historic districts. And I think that when you hear from some of the people that are here tonight in support, you'll see that he's gone above and beyond to reach out to the surrounding community. And I will address the alleyway, but if I can just go through the presentation and we'll get there, and happy to answer any questions for you all. This is our proposed site plan. I think it might be a tad bit different than the one that Jeff showed you, and that reason is that, as Mr. Walton stated, this is a request to keep the historic district overlay. And again, Nick understands the importance of the historic district. He wants to be a part of that. And were it not for the size limitation and the lack of available outdoor seating under the new land development code, he wouldn't even be here requesting this. So he did want to keep the historic district overlay and have that, but that does mean that the HPC gets a say over what the outside looks like. And we've already started those conversations. Hopefully understanding how long the process is, that if we get this rezoning tonight, we wanted to have some idea of what the HPC would request. So there have been some changes made to this site plan. Let's see. Again, Mr. Walton went over the history of the property, so I won't go over that again unless you all have specific questions. So this will provide a transition between the high-density neighboring uses, which include a nightclub and a tattoo parlor, and the surrounding lower-density museum. And we've spoken with the Bergwin Wright House and Historic Wilmington Foundation, and they are in support of this project and the request before you tonight. Again, this just goes to show that we are asking for this request to have the ability to use the entire building as the restaurant site, as well as the outdoor space, which is an underutilized parking lot right now. We're going to add trees and landscaping, which isn't often done, but we're going to be increasing the vegetation in this area. That back wall in that alley, we will be replacing that retaining wall and cleaning up the vegetation along there. It is a public alley, so we can only do what's in our part. Mr. Johnson has purchased the property from Mr. Shanklin, so it's his ball game now and his responsibility, and he'll take care of that for certain. As we stated, we've worked closely with the neighbors. He's had community meetings and met individually with some of the neighbors to discuss the impact and the use of the property. And with that, we'll answer any questions. So to the alley. It's a public alley, and the reason that Planning Commission took that off was simply it's a public alley. So right now, the Bergwin House uses it for deliveries. They have their party trucks come in and drop off chairs and tables and, you know, their events. It's used for that. But it is not wide enough for large trucks to go through. We understand that, and the protection of the historic homes on the other side is vitally important to my client, and he's worked with the historic district. But ultimately, it's not his responsibility for all of the other trucks and to decide whose delivery truck is using it and when, and if they're using it appropriately. If somebody's not following the rules he presents to them, you know, that's something that enforcement, I just can't even imagine what that would be. So regulating the alley, as Mr. Joy said, is fully within the purview of the city, and if you decide to do something like that or make it a pedestrian alley, you know, those kinds of things that you've looked at throughout the rest of the city, that's absolutely wonderful, and it would only enhance our project, but we just ask not to be treated differently than any of the other neighboring residents and businesses and other uses in the area. So we're happy to answer any questions you have particular about our project.
I just want to know, is this the pizza you make? Yep. It's damn good. You should have brought some for us.
The outdoor seating?
That was my question, Mayor. I thought he bought some to.
It looks good, man. It really does.
We make sourdough crust that we make in-house. We ferment it for 30 hours. And yeah, all of the, we're very, it's all handmade. We're very committed to quality. I would say that, I don't know if you know if you're familiar with our brand, you can buy it at some of the local stores here in package. But I would say that, to sum us up, we are very serious about the liquid and the food that we make, and very silly about everything else.
So would this be a brewery also?
Would it be?
Or are you going to be brewing in Durham? And
No,
just
we won't be
trucking it down?
producing any beer here. This will be only a restaurant and a place for people to engage with our brand. So we will deliver beer here from our brewery in Durham, in kegs and cans,
Right.
and they'll be served here along with food.
And as far as the elevation, I know that you were showing the layout of the restaurant and what have you. You don't have any front elevations or anything like that as of yet, because I know. Are you still working through the HPC process?
We have some, I believe we've begun to put together the elevations for the HPC review, and the HPC has to approve basically everything that can be seen from the sidewalk. I don't think that we have elevations for this presentation.
But is it a dramatic change in the elevation on facing Market?
No, there's virtually no change in the elevations. Facing Market Street, we will be proposed adding a wall along the alley to separate car traffic from that front garden area, and then there will be the retaining wall will be replaced along the back, which is behind that buffer of trees that you can see sort of. I don't know how to use this, but that you can see along the side of the alley towards our property, and there will be a wall which matches the opposing wall across the street, across the alley along the Bergwin Wright house property. All of it being done with, you know, matching finishes, and like I've done most of the work I've done prior to us launching into the hospitality business has been in historic restoration and preservation, and so we were very excited to find a building that we felt we could. That was sort of new enough that perhaps we would be able to transform it into a restaurant, but also at the time it was built in the 70s, I'm very impressed with the quality of the construction and the material selections. It's a beautiful building.
And knowing the restaurant business the way you know it, as far as any thoughts in respect to delivery of product to your business, you're talking about the front, because I'm thinking, Tony, in respect to Conglin's, the nightclub there that I'm sure they sell a lot of beer and what have you. I'm sure their deliveries are in the front. can't imagine where they're being delivered from, but
Yeah,
all those restaurants that you have along Market Street there, Pinpoint and Seabird and all those other places, you know.
Yeah, deliveries are definitely challenging in any city. We have a fleet of delivery vehicles that we use throughout the state to deliver to many metropolitan areas that have tight parking or, you know, loading and unloading zones. I have engaged our deliveries manager to talk with him about strategy for this. You know, there are commercial loading zones as an option. Sometimes you can park in the street. There's a turn lane in the middle of this particular section of street that runs up against some islands in the middle of the street, which we had considered talking with the city about maybe turning that section of turn lane where there's not really anywhere to turn except into the alley into a loading zone where a truck could stop, and then the truck would be able to stop there, unload, but then the driver would have to cross 2 lanes of traffic, which I don't love. But the alternative is, you know, either, I think backing in is an excellent, I mean, that's what I would have encouraged our delivery team to be doing, would be to stop, have somebody come and stop traffic and back the truck in so that it takes a few minutes, you know, a moment to do that, but you're already on the street with traffic paying attention to what the vehicle's doing as opposed to coming out of a blind spot. But yeah, I mean, I think most of our delivery vehicles are actually not large beer trucks. I wish we were big enough to have large beer trucks, but most of our delivery vehicles are vans or what are known as like urban delivery vehicles, like a Ford Transit Connect, which are like they're like commercial minivans. So those vehicles could actually drive through the alley like any normal car. You know, I mean, we may buy product from some vendors that have big delivery trucks, but most of them are pretty adept at delivering in tight urban areas. I mean, it will definitely take some work, and we're happy to work with the city on it. You know, it's a challenge that I think, you know, everybody faces in cities.
That's cool. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to open up the public hearing and ask if anyone in the public wishes to speak in favor or in opposition to item PH3.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year to you too,
Travis Gilbert, Historic Wilmington Foundation. I just want to commend Nick and his team. They've been phenomenal to work with throughout this entire process. Historic Wilmington Foundation and our colleagues at the Bergen Wright House have been just engaged every step of the way, from the community meeting to the planning board to here to City Council this evening. We have 2 easement properties within the block, 114 South 3rd Street, the DeBois Boatwright House. So we were concerned about that vegetative buffer remaining in the alleyway to preserve view sheds from that very old site for the town, and then naturally the Bergen Wright House. And we've been in constant communication with those colleagues, and Nick has really taken their feedback into consideration. Has done a phenomenal job engaging those colleagues. This evening, if council would like to direct staff to take some measures about that alleyway, I think Historic Wilmington Foundation would be happy to see those measures. The easement property, the De Rosette House at the end of that alley on the south side, our organization went through great time and expense in the 90s to restore that property, and it's one of my nightmares getting a phone call at 2 a.m. that a car is trying to squeeze through that alleyway between the De Rosette and the Mahler House to the east. So any measures outside of this rezoning would be greatly appreciated, and perhaps if this is successful tonight and rezoned to the Central Business District, Historic District overlay, this alleyway could be considered for Wilmington Downtown Incorporated alleyway engagement project, which is taking a look at alleyways across downtown. I think this alleyway could really use some revitalization and re-engaging from our public. So great job, Nick, and we support this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Tuesday, it is difficult to speak well at this podium with the majority of you viewing. Tuesday, January 4, 2022.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Any further questions from council? Madam Clerk, have you received any additional information? Okay. She is not. I'm going to now close the public hearing, and I will note that whoever makes the motion must read a consistency statement for the record. What are the wishes of council? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Spears. Mr. Barnett, will you please?
If I could just say one quick thing, since we have a motion and a second on the floor, as further discussion, I do not want us to consider it being a pedestrian alley only, because there are a number of people, as Ms. Schaefer just said, that need to use that alley, and it's also access in the handicap parking for the City Club for the De Rosette House. So while we might take some measures to, improve it in some way, I think it's really going to be up to the commercial vendors by there to figure it out on their own of what is safe and what works for them. But I don't want us to start considering somehow closing that to through traffic. Thank you.
Barnett, will you please read the consistency statement for the record?
I move to approve the proposed amendment to rezone the property located at 214 Market Street from HD Historic District to CBD H2O CD, Central Business District, Historic Business Overlay, Conditional District to allow a restaurant use with outdoor seating and other limited uses, and finding to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan. Based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and to find approval of the rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed rezoning would not disrupt the historic streetscape along this block of Market Street and would facilitate the adaptive reuse of an existing building.
Okay. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilman Anderson, second by Councilman Ravenbach. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. Good luck. Thank you. Our next item of business is item PH4, which is an ordinance for the closure of a portion of a 30-foot wide unimproved right-of-way, better known as Washington Street, located between 2326 and 2374 Carolina Beach Road terminus, approximately 525 feet in length, consisting of 0.166 of an acre of land. And at this time, I would like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Calder. Mr. Calder?
Apologize, Mr. Mayor.
That's okay. Know what you got, buddy.
Mr. Jeff Walton will overview this item for us as well.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The applicant has requested closure of a portion of Washington Street located between 2326 and 2374 Carolina Beach Road. As you recall, this is the former Starway Drive-In or Starway Flea Market site that's in question. This is the location of the site along Carolina Beach Road, adjacent to the flea market itself, but near Sunset South, Shipyard Boulevard, and such. These are the existing conditions of the right-of-way. As you can see, it's within the Starway Flea Market site. These are some of the adjacent properties along Carolina Beach Road. These are some photos of Washington Street itself. The top is looking north from the beginning of the closure within Starway. Looking south to Bordeaux, still traveling north to kind of show you the condition of the street. And then 1 block away from this boat yard, it does turn into a regular curb and gutter sidewalk type street. So this is an unimproved right-of-way. The site is zoned MD17 and was considered by this council back back in, I believe, October, which became effective under new code. The closure is approximately 525 feet in length and consists of 0.0166 of an acre. Staff as well as CFPOA have reviewed the request and found no adverse impact to services as a result of the closure. The comprehensive plan calls for consideration to be given to the impacts of the closure that may have on the public street network, including vehicular and pedestrian mobility. Right-of-way closure decisions should also be made considering the city's long-term land use and transportation goals. The proposed request for closure is within a potential redevelopment area, and we believe that will not have an impact on the surrounding street network. Closing the street, as stated, would not disrupt the public street network and would not adversely impact neighboring properties. The closure would result in an unimproved right-of-way, allowing for the potential redevelopment of parcels. Staff recommends approval of the request, and I believe the applicant is also here to make a presentation.
Any questions for staff? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This time I'd like to recognize the applicant.
Good evening. Again, for the record, I'm Cindy Wolf, and I've been assistant through this project proposal. I'm really just here to answer questions. We appreciate the staff's thorough summary of everything. One of the things that I think is the most important to as an aspect of closing this is that Washington Street south of Bordeaux is a 30-foot right-of-way. And the gap between what we are closing and Bordeaux will always be 30 feet because the Duke Energy owns that substation, and believe me, they're never going to relinquish any of theirs. So although we could have made it perhaps a 50, 60-foot right-of-way by dedicating additional land, it would never have been able to connect between Bordeaux and this section with a city street. It wasn't wide enough. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions you might have, but we think that this does avail itself to a good development scheme and doesn't adversely affect the infrastructure of the city streets.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Wolf? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to open up the public hearing and ask if anybody in the public wishes to speak in favor or in opposition to this street closure. Madam Clerk, have you received any additional information? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council. We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilmember Rivenbark. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is ordinances. Item 01 is an ordinance appropriating $15,542 to the Parks and Recreation Capital Fund for the 1898 Memorial Park Improvement Project for new signage, $5,000 from the grant award received from the North Carolina Community Foundation, and $10,542 from Parks Facilities Maintenance Project. At this time, I'd like to recognize City Manager, Mr. Cottle. Mr. Cottle.
Mr. Mayor, Amy Beatty, our Community Services Director, will overview this item.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. Yes, this is a supplemental appropriation of $5,000 from a grant award from the North Carolina Community Foundation and $10,542 from the city's annual Parks Capital Improvement Project to purchase a new sign for the 1898 park. The 1898 park is of great historical significance, commemorating the 1898 massacre. The goal of this project is to add an enhanced sign that has a larger, more prominent site both vehicular and pedestrian, to bring greater awareness to the park. The initial design was presented to City Council in early 2021, and the general consensus was that the design should be more substantial. Revised options were presented to the City Council Governance Committee, and the direction given to staff was to pursue a design with a tumbled brick base, cast stone, and raised oiled lettering. And you've seen the rendering in your packet. If this ordinance is adopted tonight, then city staff would be free to pursue procurement of the sign, barring any sourcing and supply chain issues that have not yet to be brought to our attention. Fabrication would take about 2 months. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Anderson?
Amy, I looked and couldn't, it's probably there, but I was working with my laptop today instead of this. Is there anywhere, there's a shadogram or whatever the term is with a lady standing beside it? I was trying to figure out how tall it was overall. And it looked like it's about waist high. I mean, on that, if you look at the presentation, Dylan, I don't know if you can find the picture.
So
How tall is this?
How tall is it? I may need communications help with that.
Well, if you scan through this, or go back through, I mean, typically that's used to give you scale. Can you scan through it, Dylan? There's one with a person standing
It should be in the, Dylan, it should be in one of the slides to the, in the presentation to the governance committee.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was an attachment to the item. But I do want to say that you're right, that about,
Looks like it's 36 inches, 34 inches, something in that range.
I mean, it's got varying elevations, so I'm going to guess it's about 48 to 36 inches.
Yeah, see,
There. So yes, about
well, that's a lot,
waist
it's
high.
a lot taller than that then. I mean, not many people, I mean, their feet are below the thing and I'm just curious.
The intent of the design was that it be prominently visible from a vehicle traveling the speed limit on 3rd Street. So that would be, I can tell you that the size is larger than what is in the city's adopted signage plan for a park of this size, because the intent is for it to be substantial, I would say, akin to a gateway monument and not just a park sign.
I'm not for or against, really. I was just trying to, it was one thing that was missing, it was kind of the overall
Point taken.
width and height. All right.
Good point. And this item is just asking for appropriation for the cost, and staff can certainly follow up with you on the exact dimensions of the sign.
Amy, do you have the location of the sign? You've got the monument, and that picture, of course, and I'm sure it's not to scale. Is it, how far is it from that monument?
So where the current sign is, it's going to replace that sign.
Okay, so it's right there?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Could you just show the picture, it ran through it very quickly, of the one that governance was suggesting?
Yes. Jared and Dylan, that's option 2.
Because we went through quite a lot.
There were 4 or 5 that were presented. Yes, ma'am. So again, it was the tumbled brick base with cast stone as the face, and the lettering is offset, and it is what is called an oiled bronze, meant to evoke the material that's the patina of the paddles of the memorial.
Ms. Maybe will the sign be lit?
The sign is not currently lit. We can look into what that added cost would be and bring that back to City Council. There could be funds available, again, in the Parks Capital Fund to add that. There is electricity at the site, so we can look into what that cost would be.
There it is. There it is.
I'm assuming that you're asking about uplighting, so that
Traditional landscape uplighting.
we can look into that.
Because it's solid. I mean, it's,
Yes.
you know, but anyway, that was sort of the end idea, which I think is very attractive.
Any questions, any additional questions? Okay. Thank you, Amy. Okay, what are the wishes of council? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Spears, second by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Waddell, second by Councilmember Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item O2, which is an ordinance appropriating a $10,000 grant award from Stonyfield Farm Incorporated for a land management pilot program at the Olson Softball Complex. At this time, I'd like to recognize City Manager Mr. Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Beatty will overview this item for us as well.
Thank you.
Good evening again. As the title suggests, this is a $10,000 appropriation from a grant award from Stonyfield Farm to conduct a pilot field management project at Olson Park. As a reminder to most of council and as information to our new council member, the city was approached by a citizen, Mr. Evan Folds, who's a member of the New Hanover County Soil and Water Conservation District, to pursue a pilot project focusing on the effectiveness of an integrated pest management program or synthetic-free pest management program at a city site. Based upon direction from the mayor and city council members, Olson Park was selected as the site so that conventional methods could be compared to an integrated pest management program at a site with similar conditions. So the intent of the program is to purchase materials and train staff in the integrated pest management program. The program will, as a pilot project, will be evaluated for the effectiveness, appearance, ease of maintenance, and cost. And city staff will report those results back out to council upon the conclusion of the pilot project. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Beatty? Okay. What are the wishes of council? In respect to the item, we have a motion to approve by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Rivenbark, second by Councilmember Spears. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item O3, which is an ordinance authorizing the creation of one full-time, time-limited position funded by a grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes. At this time, I'd like to recognize City Manager Mr. Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Suzanne Rogers, our Community Development Housing Planner, will overview this item for us.
Thank you, Mr. Caudle, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As the mayor introduced, we have an ordinance before you to add a full-time, time-limited position as we complete the city's lead hazard reduction grant program, which was funded back in 2020 by HUD. Was a 3.5-year project. So we, as we enter the final phase of this project, have received approval from HUD to add an additional program assistant position to wrap up the program. If you have any questions about the implementation of the program, the lead Hazard Program Manager, R.B. Gardner, is present to answer any of those questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Suzanne? Okay. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
What are the wishes of council in respect to the ordinance? We have a motion approved by Councilmember Ravenbark, second by Councilmember Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to item 04, which is an ordinance making supplemental appropriation in the amount of $26,856 for salary and benefits for a full-time paralegal position in the city attorney's office to help expedite the city's current capital improvement projects. At this time, I'd like to recognize the city manager, Mr. Cottle. Mr. Cottle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Joy will address this item for us.
Mayor and council, at your retreat earlier, late last year, you heard of the amount of work that is needed to do on the capital improvement or the transportation bond projects, the capital improvement project. Part of that is real estate acquisition. Quite frankly, we've got to acquire the property before we can build things on it. And in order to make it an efficient and cost-effective, doing that in-house. Quite frankly, outside counsel, outside real estate paralegals cost approximately 2.5 to 3 times what it costs to have inside folks do that. Of course, we don't want to hire a lot of folks just not to have any work for them to do in a few years, so we very carefully monitor that. We will certainly have more than enough work to keep this position added in mid-year so that we can really get going on these projects, as well as another position in the regular budget. So this will simply be to have the number of workers we need to get the job done.
Thank you. Ready to expedite this thing? What are the wishes of council? We have a motion made by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilman Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Ravenbark, second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? The item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to item 05, which is an ordinance authorizing the addition of a risk manager position and making supplemental appropriation to the general fund in the amount of $37,977. This time, I'd like to recognize the city manager, Mr. Cottle. Mr. Cottle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our interim deputy city manager, Ms. Moretti, will overview this item for us.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. The ordinance before you tonight is a request to authorize the addition of a risk manager position and approve the funding needed to hire this position through June 30 in the amount of $37,977, which then will be included with the annual budget going forward. New Hanover County Risk Management Department has been providing these services to the city since 2001. And we had been paying 4% of our premium up until the current year. Late last fiscal year, we came to you in June to let you know we were informed by the county that if we wanted to continue our services with them, that fee was going up to $190,640 plus 3% increase each year going forward, at which time for fiscal year 21, we paid $92,000 for the services. So we worked with them for the current fiscal year and negotiated an amount of $130,000 to get us through this year and give us time to evaluate the position and bring it back to council to authorize. We are wanting to hire this position hopefully by March and bring them in to work with the county before that service ends on June 30. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Are there any questions of staff? Thank you. What are the wishes of council in respect to the ordinance? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Ravenbark. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? The item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Ravenbark, second by Councilmember Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. Our next item of business, which is item 06, is an ordinance authorizing the addition of a deputy city manager position to the general fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021. This time I'd like to recognize the city manager, Mr. Tony Cottle. Mr. Cottle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try to get through this without barking at you. In June of 2015, we authorized the second deputy city manager's position. In that 6.5 years, the workload has grown as we have added programs and emphasis on other programs. For example, the renewed emphasis on the transportation and park bond projects, the Rise Together initiative, the new strategic plan that you'll be working on in the coming year. And as a result of that, we found the need to ask for an additional position as a deputy city manager. In this particular request, you will only see the request for the authorization of the position. Salary savings will pay for it for the rest of the year, but then, of course, it would have to be budgeted in the coming fiscal year. We'd like to recommend approval of the ordinance, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? City staff. Mr. Ravenbach?
Have we ever been at that level before in your memory, Tony, where we had that amount of staff?
I do not remember it, no, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Spears?
Tony.
Yes, sir.
I don't even know how I want to say this. How are we looking to fill this position? Are we going to look out? Are we going to? Don't joke.
That's good. I like that. We will, I've already told the staff that we will advertise both positions internally, the position that I left as well as the new position if authorized. We'd advertise both of them internally. We'd take a look at the applications, the needs of the folks going into that position, and then if we could fill them both internally, we would. If we needed to go externally for one or both, we would do that as well. So we will start with an internal advertisement, then falling back to an external advertisement.
But don't you think we should just open it up in the beginning and see what we get? I'm not saying that we don't have any good talent internally that could fill it, but I think this is starting to become the norm for us. We fill the police chief internally. You replace Sterling, you're internal. How do we know what's out there? I mean, how are we growing or how are we improving as a city, as an organization, if we're not even testing the waters?
There is certainly something to be said for going outside and bringing in new blood into an organization. As Sterling and I both have said before, your eyes are widest open the first 30 days you're in an organization. But this is a testament to the succession planning that we have been working on now for about 4 or 5 years. And we do believe that the bench is deep in some areas, not so deep in others. We'll certainly be glad to go outside immediately if that's, if that's what council would prefer, and then allow the folks internally to compete against both internal and external candidates.
Just my opinion.
Tony, on the position, and I know that everybody's got a different, Al's got one, Tom's got one, obviously you're the manager, and Jennifer, this new position, is there a particular department or area of expertise that you will be, or that person will be focused on?
Yes, sir. We have, over the years, have divided responsibilities up based upon whatever need happened to come about and whatever was important at the time. Mr. Moten and I split it up based upon just tradition more than anything else. In this particular case, we've evaluated and we've looked at the different focus areas that exist in your now defunct but only existing strategic plan that you have. And this third position would be responsible for looking at public safety to the extent that fire and emergency management are included in it. And then it would be looking at economic development to include the planning department, as well as the economic development, downtown development, those types of things. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you very much. The proposal for the organizational structure is on your screen now.
Gotcha, I see.
You'll note that one of them is the middle position is aimed towards trying to focus principally on internal services, and then the one on the far left would be more external service-oriented, community services-oriented type of projects.
So, just going back, this particular individual would then have a responsibility for planning, police, fire, emergency management?
Not police. I would retain oversight of the police department because about ordinance. I'm required to do that. We certainly could change that ordinance, but right now, given, the heightened awareness of police and the law enforcement function in communities, I think that's probably best to leave it where it is.
Okay. And they would also have responsibility for all of the economic development?
Yes, sir.
Portions of
Yes, sir.
of the house, okay. All right, Mr. Rambar?
Just as a thought, dovetailing on what Kevin was saying, I don't think that taking a look at other people necessarily violates your succession policy. You came from somewhere else. Al did, Jennifer did. I mean, there's a lot of talent out there, and we have a lot of talent within the confines of our city staff, but I don't think that that's violating anything that we think up here. I mean, if you're that narrow on it, I think sometimes you limit yourself to what may be out there.
You know, yes, Tony, and I guess this is really more of a discussion that we all need to have when we get to a retreat. But one of the concerns that I have is geographically, we're limited. We're 50 square miles. There is no more annexation in the state of North Carolina. And people expect us to deliver a significant amount of services, and at the same time, they want us to keep our taxes low. And it's challenging when you can't grow geographically anymore. So I would hope that whoever this person is, under that responsibility would also be the opportunity to look for growth opportunities that may go outside of our borders, i.e. voluntary annexations, because if you want to continue to grow your tax base at some level, you know, we're going to have to figure out ways to be able to grow the city. And although people think that we are growing, and we are, the area is growing, but the city itself, if you look at the population and you look at the growth rate within the incorporated city limits as compared to the unincorporated areas of the city, of the county, it's very low. And we have a lot of elderly citizens in our community that could be pushed out with higher tax rates too. So we have to look for ways to be able to grow the city. And I would hope that this new position would be specific to finding ways to think outside of the box. So it's just some thought on that. If you're going to have that with economic development, that would be incorporated in that.
May I?
Yes,
we talk about growing the city, you know, starting back over in what they used to call smart growth and redevelop what's already here, and it causes a lot of heartburn. It really does, and we see that tonight. So the one place that we know that we're gaining some traction is with sales tax revenue, and that's, you know, I think it was 21% this year.
Thus far, yes, sir.
So, you know, that's something that hopefully we can continue to grow. But we've got to start growing up and taking advantage of what's out there. And when these developers come along and want to buy a block of dilapidated whatever, we need to be their partners in this thing.
I would also, I would also say we've got a double whammy here in terms of opportunity. We've got a planning director's position that is open that we'll also have to look at that for the long term. We've been focused on the land development code now for the last few years. This would give the new person the opportunity to do that, as well as potentially a third deputy city manager that would have that kind of focus.
Tony, I don't have any opposition to going outside. I mean, obviously, you folks have created a succession plan that has been working, and the people that we put in place have come up through the ranks, and that's great. And that was something I know that Sterling and you and a lot of people have been working on for a number of years. But I don't have any opposition to go outside just to take a look. I think, yes, to Kevin's point, I think it's prudent, and I think that in this particular case, on this particular job description, if it's going to be economic development, it's going to fall under that umbrella. I would like somebody with that thought process to be looking for ways to be able to expand our city limits in some way, shape, or form, and maybe work with private property owners that maybe are near the city that may want to voluntarily bring their property into the city that we could work with. 'Cause I think it's the only way we're going to be able to grow. Okay. So with that, we have a motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilmember Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Spears. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which are our resolutions. R1 is a resolution authorizing an adjustment to the sales price of the city-owned real property located at 1650 South Front Street, better known as Optimus Park, to the North Carolina Ports Authority. At this time, I'd like to recognize the city manager, Mr. Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to say thank you very much for that vote. But on this item, Mr. Tom Moten, our Deputy City Manager, will overview.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This item is brought to you to adjust the sales price that you approved for Optimus Park sale in April 2021. Subsequent to negotiating the sales price agreement with the North Carolina Ports as well as CFPUA, city staff became aware of a contestation of the right-of-way and subsequently determined that we were not able to sell the right-of-way that adjoined another property. As a consequence, we reduced the sales price based on a per square foot value, and the adjustment is approximately $33,000, and we recommend that you approve the adjusted sales price of $303,000 plus $1,000 to North Carolina Ports Authority.
Okay. Very good. Any questions for Tom? Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
What are the wishes of council in respect to the resolution? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is R2, which is a resolution appointing A. Penelope Spicer Sidbury as our city clerk. I will note that I am going to administer the oath to Mrs. Sidbury. And we're going to have to take a vote first?
Yeah.
We'll take the vote? Let's take the vote first. Okay. What are the wishes of council in respect to the resolution? Okay, we have a motion to approve by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. Now, at this time, I'm going to go. Repeat after me. I, and state your name,
I, A. Penelope Spicer Sidbury,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and maintain the Constitution
that I will support and maintain the Constitution,
and laws of the United States,
laws of the United States,
that I will support and maintain
that I will support and maintain
Constitution and laws of the state of North Carolina,
Constitution and laws of the state of North Carolina,
not inconsistent herewith,
not inconsistent herewith,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of my office as city clerk
the duties of my office as city clerk
under the council manager form of government for the city of Wilmington.
under the council manager form of government for the city of Wilmington.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. What's that? I can't do it. Okay, and our next item of business is R3, which is resolution appointing John Joy as our city attorney. And I will now ask for the council's wishes in respect to appointing John Joy as our city attorney. We have a motion approved by Councilmember Barnett, second by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes. In discussion, all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Oh, we had one person who said no. Congratulations, unanimous vote.
Thank you so much. It is
You're
an
welcome.
honor to serve.
This concludes our regular agenda. Are there any items to be brought forward by our city attorney?
No items.
City manager?
Mr. Mayor, just to note that tonight we have instituted a number of measures that are kind of devoted towards the stopping the spread of Omicron. We have asked that folks wear masks here. I've asked that the staff be prepared and wear masks to all public meetings. And we are also, as you noticed, sanitizing the podium as well as doing temperature checks. We have not asked for anything additional because we know that the health department will meet on January 18th to consider countywide responsibilities and changes. And so we're going to wait and see what happens with that. I just wanted to let you know what you were seeing all of this for and what we were waiting on. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
No, sir, nothing new to add. Just want to say thank you to the mayor and council for another 2 years of confidence. Thank you. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Penny. And I'm going to start, we'll start go back and forth on this. So I'm going to start over here on this end with Kevin Spears.
No, I just want to say Happy New Year, and I dare to say this, I'm glad to be back.
I am too. Mr. Anderson?
Happy New Year's. Well, I want to thank Al Ragland tonight for his, I bet when he looked under his job description, wiping the, Tony said, who's going to do that? Oh, it's Al. Look right here. It's number 16. But thank you, Al. I'm kidding. It's good to have a Hanover here tonight. Congratulations to those guys. That's a great feat. One thing that goes unmentioned is they were in the 3A state championship the year before and lost playing a man down most of the game. And when they got moved up to 4A, everyone told them there's no way they'd win it and play in the biggest schools. So big achievement for them. Thank you.
Mr. Rombart? Yes, sir. Mayor Pro Tem? Mr. Barnett?
Just two things. One is we want to offer condolences to the family of Mrs. Alice Mary Thatch, who passed away. She was the founder and editor of the Journal, and she'll be funeralized tomorrow in the Raleigh area at the Good Hope Missionary Baptist Church, 4209 Smithfield Road in Knightsdale, North Carolina. That's the one thing. The second thing is I'd like for us to, I know, Mayor, you wrote a letter about what's happening like in Creekwood with the mold, and I'd like to just get us some more further information on what's going on with that. And then the last thing is I want to remind people to wear your mask and stay really social distancing and really protect yourselves because the environment is really serious. All right, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Mr. Waddell?
I look forward to working on behalf of the citizens of Wilmington. Again, thank you for working with me. I look forward to learning and working with all of you and with the staff. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And with that, Happy New Year. Good to be back to work, and we got a lot ahead of us and a lot of things to get done, and just appreciate all the staff and all the people that are working hard for us every single day. With that, thank you for taking an interest in your government. We stand adjourned.